Hi everyone, it's John from RFM Calc, and today I'm talking about Ecwid. So Ecwid is a software as a service e-commerce platform. It originally launched in 2009, having been co-founded by Ruslan Fajlev, who also co-founded Ecwid back in 2000, which I believe is the world's first PHP online shopping cart in Russia. So it originally started as a platform really to embed e-commerce functionalities onto other sites. So if you had a WordPress blog, you could embed e-commerce functionality onto that. And indeed, Ecwid is actually short for e-commerce widgets. That's where the name comes from. But over time, it's also evolved into more of a direct competitor for those full service online shopping platforms like Shopify. So you've still got that functionality where you can embed it onto other sites, and I think that's still a popular part of the platform, but it's also a standalone e-commerce platform in its own right. The business was acquired by POS provider Lightspeed in 2021 for a substantial sum, which is why you can see you've got a little buy Lightspeed under the logo there. And it's a very popular platform. So they don't have a lot about usage stats actually on the website, but I can see with builtwith.com that it powers around 1 million sites, which is certainly a substantial number. So it's a very popular e-commerce platform. It's used by a lot of people, and that's why I wanted to speak about it today. So pricing wise, I always like to talk a little bit about pricing. It's, I suppose, slightly cheaper than Shopify. So they have this free plan that's free forever. Which is different to a lot of shopping carts. A lot of shopping carts will give you a free trial for a period with all the features. Ecwid kind of goes slightly differently and have a free plan that is genuinely free, but as you'd expect, I suppose, it is very limited in functionality. So you can do the basics and you can sell online, but a lot of the functionality isn't available. They then have these plans, Venture, Business and Unlimited. So these come in cheaper than Shopify, as it's definitely pitched at a cheaper level purposely, I would say. But again, you know, the more you spend, kind of the more features you get, really. It does, of course, integrate with RFM Calc, no problem, or I wouldn't be doing this video, but it's worth noting that to export the CSV file you need for the order data that we need to export from Ecwid to then import into RFM Calc, you do need the venture plan as a minimum. So that's what I've signed up for, which is slightly annoying, but you can understand that, I suppose. And it's just a different way of pricing, I think, to rather than give a 14-day free trial with everything and then have nothing, they do genuinely have a free plan. But the CSV export you'll need for RFM Calc is only available on the venture plan and above. So that's what I'll be demonstrating today. So yeah, today we'll be talking about Ecwid as a platform, so I'll go through the admin area and just give a little overview demo of how that works, all the functionality, or a lot of the functionality anyway, and compare that to other platforms. We'll then talk about the orders and how we can export those from Ecwid into a CSV file, and then I'll go through how to then import that CSV file into RFM Calc, which will allow us to generate all those great reports that obviously you can't get from Ecwid out of the box, things like lifetime value, average time between orders, and so on. So I've signed up for a trial store, or I should say a paid store, as I said. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so let's have a look at my Ecwid control panel. So this is the main dashboard area. So you can see it gives you kind of a little overview of visitors and revenue and orders received and so on. And then a little step-by-step guide in terms of all the things you need to set up. So the order screen I'll come back to in a second, but this is where all your orders come through. So you can see I've put through a few test orders on the site. One of the good things is that you can add manual payment methods. So I've not had to hook up any live payment gateways for testing, which is good. And I could do that actually even on the free plan. So you can see all these are paid by cash, which definitely makes testing a lot easier when you can do that. It's quite frustrating when platforms don't give you that kind of option. But Ecwid does, and in fairness to them on the free plan as well. It's quite intuitive, I would say, the screen. So things like if I wanted to change this from paid to awaiting payment, it's just one click, nice and easy. I don't have to tick a tick box and then change something or go into the order. So I can change that to shipped. Simple as that. So that's quite neat. You can also obviously click in and get more data on the order. So you've got obviously all the products that are ordered, the billing and shipping address, and the payment details. Bit of additional information as well. You can download a PDF for the order as well. Let's have a look at that. There's a nice kind of simple laid out PDF in terms of the order there and a barcode as well. So, that's fairly standard stuff, but it's laid out quite neatly and quite easy to kind of manage. And like I say, updating the orders is fairly intuitive as well. Obviously, you've got the tick box option, so if you're updating in bulk, you can do that too. In terms of the product setup, so the product setup I would say is pretty straightforward as well. So I've set up a few products here. If I just go to add new product and just take you through this. So you've got the image, name, SKU. There are little things that I would expect to be slightly better. So if I just put in test product here, you can see it's telling me there's unsaved changes, and that's nice and neat. But if I put in a weight here of 2 kilos, for example, but then I go to the shipping and pickup screen, you can see it still says 0 there. So it's just little bits of kind of intuitive functionality that I would have expected from an established platform like Ecwid that's obviously very popular, been going a long time. When you update the weight here, I would expect it to automatically to feed through to here as well. So it's a little bit disappointing, I suppose. I mean, that's a very minor thing, but there's just little tweaks that they could potentially make to improve this. You can assign categories really easily as well. That's straightforward. You've got things called ribbons, which you can add as well to the product. So you can say sale, for example, over the top like that. Which is quite straightforward as well. So that's, I believe, with the venture plan as well. That's not on the free plan. So that's the kind of functionality that you have to pay for. Attributes are quite straightforward as well. So you can see I've added a random one there. So you can add additional custom attributes to the product relatively easily. Options works quite straightforwardly. So if I just do a test option here, I can call it radio button and then just go variant 1. Variant 2 and variant 3. You can see that's relatively easy. It does have this slight quirk, so a couple of platforms do this where instead of actually being able to set a set value for the variant, it's just a plus or a minus modifier, which is kind of frustrating. I don't know, most e-commerce platforms gives you the option to say variant 1 costs £10, not £10 in addition to the base price. So it's a little bit strange. I think it's a little bit more confusing for customers as well on the front end because it comes through as a plus a value, and so before the customer clicks on it, they kind of have to work out in their head what it actually costs. So some platforms do this. It's not an approach I'm a fan of really. I would much prefer it to say just equals £10, equals £15, equals £20 for the variants. You do have the option to add different images and SKUs as well via product variations, but that's only available on the business plan. So even though I'm paying for the venture plan at £15 or £18 a month, whatever it was, I still can't add stock to each variation, which is a little bit disappointing. But it's not a huge increase in price, I think, to go to the business plan. So you can understand that, but obviously slightly frustrating for this demo, I suppose. But that option is there if you pay for it. And then you've got the basic things like shipping. Related products you could add as well. So it's fairly straightforward, I would say, to add a product. Not the most intuitive, and certain bits I would definitely change, but it works and it's fairly straightforward. So categories is probably going to tell me I'm not saved, but that's fine because I don't want to. So if I go to categories, so you can see adding categories is relatively easy. So you can add more categories here. If I go to the category I've created, you can see it's relatively easy there to set a name and an image for the category, enable or disable the category as well. And then I can go to category products. And this does have a little drag and drop interface. So you can change the order of the products in the category relatively easily. So being able to merchandise a category is a really important feature of any e-commerce platform. Some platforms actually make this very, very difficult to find. Some platforms are better than Ecwid, I would say, and make this much more visual in terms of dragging your products around to see what order they appear in. But you can see it's still, at least they've got the option, and it's relatively straightforward, I would say, just to change the order of your products there in the category. We've then got the marketing section, which has quite a few options in terms of integrating with Google and Facebook, abandoned carts as well. But again, you need the business plan to access that, so even though I'm paying for my plan, I still can't access that functionality. Discount codes and so on, so fairly standard things. You've got some automated email functionality as well, which again, you need the business plan for, so I can't demonstrate on this because I'm not upgrading just to show that. And then obviously integration with Google Analytics and so on. In terms of reports, there's not really a lot. In fact, there's not anything actually on Ecwid. So interestingly, they don't even bother trying to do anything really reporting wise. It's all about just integrating with other apps. So you've got this one they push at the top for free advanced statistics by Clicken. But it's an external app that you can integrate. And then you've got other ones here. Obviously, Google Analytics is one of those. But in terms of reports you actually get with Ecwid out of the box, I can't see any. To be honest, it's all done through apps, which is fine, and you could understand, why bother building that functionality if other people can build it better for you. So you can understand that. They haven't. It's different. Most e-commerce platforms would put some form of reporting on there, but I can understand the decision not to bother at all and just say, look, these apps can handle that. We'll just focus on the platform itself. Under sales channels, so you've got quite a lot of different sales channels. So I mentioned before that Ecwid really started as a way to embed e-commerce functionality onto other platforms, and that's still here. And so you've still got those options. So you can see here, you can embed it onto basically any platform with code. So you've got WordPress, Wix, Weebly, Joomla, Squarespace, all of these, and then you've got custom options as well, as it says, to blend in seamlessly with any website. So that's still a kind of core part of the proposition. I suppose what I'm focused on more is actually orders through my Ecwid platform rather than embedding it. But the export process in terms of getting those orders out of Ecwid and into RFM Calc is still the same that we'll talk about. And then I wanted to talk about just the design functionality as well. So this, I would say, is a little bit less intuitive than a lot of modern e-commerce platforms. So I was expecting this to be a bit more feature-rich. So you can see in terms of changing the look of the store, you've got some kind of radio button and drop-down options in terms of how big you want the images to be, where you want the content to appear, and that's fine. It just feels a little bit outdated, I would say, in terms of how it works. And then you can obviously create your own theme with CSS as well, which is a nice option. Actually, to edit the store, you've got to go back to, I think there's an option here. This confused me last time, but if I go back to website, I can then go to design rather than through the design configuration, which is a little bit, again, not as intuitive as you'd expect. So if I open the site appearance tab here, you can see this is my site that I've set up, my demo store, and you've got all your functionality in here to just go through and change your content. And it's reasonably straightforward, but it doesn't have what I expected it to have in terms of a big range of dozens and dozens of themes, for example, that a lot of platforms have now, just to easily change the look and feel with a couple of clicks. That functionality doesn't seem to be there. It's not theme based. It's the same kind of layout for every store, but then you customize that, which is fine. And you can still get, I'm sure, to the end result you want relatively easily by going through these steps, but it's just not as intuitive, I would say, and not as design focused as a lot of modern e-commerce platforms are. So I think it falls down a little bit in that area, Ecwid versus other platforms. And then just to say on the settings as well, so we've got payment options. So you can see I've set up my manual pay by cash option, which is very helpful. The methods they push mostly are Stripe, Square and PayPal, which is fine. So a lot of platforms push Stripe and PayPal. Square's obviously very popular as well. Not all e-commerce platforms kind of push that as a primary payment gateway, but Ecwid do, which is fine. You can then see, though, you've got down here focus to the UK. Because I'm in the UK, you've got quite a lot of other gateways out of the box that you can add. So my friend's Adyen, which is a great option. Obviously, you've got Klarna, although via Stripe. You've got ClearPay. Opeo is a really popular one in the UK as well, formerly SagePay. So you've got a lot of options there kind of out of the box in terms of UK-focused payment gateways you can add. And then there are additional ones down here. So if you want to do more worldwide gateways, there's a big list here that you can integrate as well. So whatever payment gateway you use, unless it's really, really obscure, you should be pretty covered there as well. And then finally, you've got a few kind of delivery options. So I've set up kind of free and expensive shipping just to kind of demonstrate this, but you can add delivery options relatively easily. This all works pretty seamlessly. And then you've got various other settings as well for taxes and so on, and product filters, and there's a few more options down there. So I think overall, it's relatively intuitive, I would say. There's definitely some areas that I think it falls behind other e-commerce platforms on, in certain parts, particularly the design aspect, and maybe a little bit on the product management as well. But generally, it's a straightforward platform. It's got a lot of features once you pay for them, and really you'll have no issue. If you've got a little bit of e-commerce experience, you'll have no issue, I think, setting up your store and getting going. So now I've taken you through the store. Next step is to export these orders as a CSV file. So let's talk about how we do that. So to export the orders, we just scroll down to the bottom of the page here, and you can see this export orders option. So as I mentioned, this isn't available on the free plan. This is only available on the venture plan and up, which is why I've had to upgrade to demonstrate this. But it always appears here just with a button saying you need to upgrade if you want access. It's then just a case of clicking the export all button. And you've got a few options here. So by default, it will try and force a semicolon delimiter. Make sure you change that to comma, because for a CSV file, it really should be a comma. You've then got the option of which columns to select. So, it's nice to have this option. So you can select all but item details, or none, and then just kind of customize the columns you want to show. So for me, all is fine. All but item details is fine as well, because at RFM Calc, we don't do anything with the product data. We're focused really on the order and customer data. That's the important thing for us. So you're fine to exclude the product details. I'll demonstrate both files in a second, just so you've got a good understanding of what they both look like and what they both contain. But basically, for RFM Calc, really, all but item details is ideal. There's no date range option, so it's just basically select the columns and select the delimiter, and that's it. You then just click download CSV file, and you can see that's pushed straight to the browser, so I can save that. And that is now downloaded. So now we've got the files, let's have a little look what they look like. So this is the order file without the product data, first of all. So that's the one I've just exported. Obviously, I've saved it in Excel and just spread the columns out a bit to make it a bit more readable than the raw CSV. So there's a few things to know, I think, structurally about the file. The first thing is the orders run oldest to newest. So a lot of platforms run newest to oldest. Shopify, for example, will list orders in their CSV, export newest to oldest. Magento lists oldest to newest, so it varies platform to platform. For RFM Calc, it doesn't make any difference. We can handle both, and we'll auto-detect that for you as part of the import process. But it's good to be aware, I think, when you're looking at the file, how that's structured. You've then got just running through the columns. So you've got order number, which you can see is a random selection of characters. So there's no kind of incremental value that you might be used to with some platforms. So you'd expect your orders to kind of go up by one each time in terms of an order number. But here it's kind of random letters. So I'm sure that's a unique value. I'm going to have to assume that's a unique value for your store. But just bear in mind that it's not an incremental value if that's something you're used to. You've then got the customer's email, which is very important, which we'll need as an identifier, which we'll come back to. You've got the subtotal without tax. You've got the timestamp of the order. We've then got the shipping details in terms of the name. So the name is the first name and surname combined into one field. Some e-commerce platforms separate those. Ecwid doesn't, which is no problem. You then got the shipping address details in terms of street 1, street 2, city, country, postal code, state, if there was a state, and the country. So you've also got the phone number as well for the shipping information. So that's all fairly standard. What I would say is it's a little bit strange in terms of how the columns are labelled. So they've got all these kind of underscores. They're not very human readable, which is unusual. So it's really kind of made, I suppose, from a system point of view rather than a CSV you're actually going to look at. But it doesn't really make a difference at all to RFM Calc, but it's just something to be aware of. Because most e-commerce platforms will export CSVs with kind of human-readable column names. And obviously these aren't unreadable, they're just not as, I suppose, user-friendly as some platforms. You then got all the billing details, so these are all repeated. So even if the billing address differs, or I should say is the same to the shipping address, it will still repeat all the information in the billing field. So that's, again, kind of standard. But good to know. So you got all the same information here. Again, you've got the phone number based on the billing address as well as the shipping address. Even if that's the same, it'll repeat it in both sets. You've then got the payment methods. So all mine are pay by cash, as I mentioned. The shipping method, you've got payment and fulfillment status. You've got the current order status as well. In terms of the fulfillment status code. So all mine were processing when I generated this file. You then got the order subtotal without tax separately. You've got the order shipping without tax as well. So you've got all the kind of values that you need really. And there's a handling fee column if that's set up on your store as well. There isn't on mine, so that's all 0. And then all the way across here, you've got the actual order total in terms of the grand total the customer's actually paying, which is always the value I like to focus on when I'm doing reports. But that's there, and then you've got that without tax as well. So quite detailed in terms of the different kind of order totals. So when you do reports, if you want to do a subtotal without tax, for example, as the value that you're reporting for orders, that's absolutely fine. You can just select that column during the RFM Calc process, which I'll detail in a second when we do the import. You've then got some information about discounts, if any have been applied, the order weight, and then a few other extra fields as well, things like the customer's IP address, which I've just blanked out for the purposes of this video, and then a few other kind of fields around payment transaction ID and referrer ID and things like that, which aren't populated on mine. So it's a fairly standard CSV, I would say. Nothing complicated. Like I say, the column names aren't as intuitive as some platforms, and also I think the ordering of the column is a bit weird as well. It's kind of strange that you've got this total without tax all the way over here, and then you've also got order total without tax all the way over here, which appears to be the same thing. So that again is a little bit unintuitive, I would say, in terms of how that's structured. It might actually be slightly different because that one's got only £4.16 there. Whereas the actual order total without tax is 166, so that's a little bit strange to have two very similar columns with different values there. But the main thing is all the information we need for RFM Calc is in there, and it's fairly easy to identify, so there's no kind of issue importing into RFM Calc. I will also just demonstrate the multi-line format. So this is the same file, but this time I selected to include the product data in the file. So I thought this was useful to look at as well. Even though we don't use this at RFM Calc, it's just good to be aware, I think, of the option that you've got. So you can see basically it's very similar in terms of order number and email and so on, but you've also got the product details. So you've got the SKU and the name of the product, and also all the product specific information in terms of the price of the product, any options. So you can see I've got a size option on a few of these products. And basically what ties all these lines together is the order number. So some e-commerce platforms will just have on the very top line of the order the key order information in terms of the order total and delivery and shipping address, and then on subsequent lines just the product information tied together by the order ID. Ecwid is different in that it repeats everything on every line, which kind of makes it a little bit easier to manage, I suppose. But all the delivery information, all the order totals, all the payment information is all repeated on every line, even those product specific lines as well. So that's just something to be aware of. Like I say, if you're already using this format for something else and you want to upload this multi-line format into RFM Calc will handle it no problem. But obviously, because we're just ignoring that product information, it's preferable if you can, just for the ease of downloading and the size of the download file and so on, just to export without the product data, because we don't do anything with it either. But like I say, if you are using this format already, that's absolutely fine, and RFM Calc will basically just amalgamate all the order information into one line, and it handles multi-line CSVs no problem at all. So now we've been through the files, let's see how we can create a project in RFM Calc and upload the order data. Okay, so now we've got our export. The next step is to create a project in RFM Calc. So I've got my test account open here with all my projects. So I'm just going to go here to create a new one, and we'll just call it test Ecwid, and just test Ecwid.com. So in terms of the project currency, all the orders I've placed are in GBP. Obviously, RFM Calc supports all world currencies, so you can change a different one there if you need to for your default. For the order date column, if we just have a look at the order date, you can see it's a nice clear kind of timestamp in terms of the name of the month, the day of the month and the year. So the default interpretation is absolutely fine for that. As I mentioned, orders run oldest to newest in the Ecwid CSV, but auto detect is fine again. And that's all the settings we need really to set up with the project. Simple as that. I can then go into my project and schedule the report. So all I'm going to do is upload the raw CSV. So the same information that's in the Excel file I'm demonstrating, but obviously in the original CSV format. We'll just upload that nice and quick. And then it's just a case of mapping the columns. So order ID, as we can see, is order number. So there, we've got order dates is timestamp. So again, not the most kind of user-friendly name, but it's still fairly clear, I would say, what it is. I think, did we have a currency code column? Let's have a look. No, there's not a currency code column, but that's fine. That's optional. So we don't have to set that anyway. The only advantage of setting a currency code column is if you are taking orders in multiple currencies, what RFM Calc can do is convert orders in other currencies to your base currency at the prevailing exchange rate when it generates the report. And that's a really cool feature. So that means when you're looking at lifetime value, you're getting an accurate picture in your base currency rather than kind of having to ignore or not correctly convert other currencies. But that doesn't apply to Ecwid, which is fine. Now for the order value column, you'll notice there's a lot of different potential values for this. You've got this weird total without tax over here, which differs to the order total without tax over here. But the one I'm going to go for is order total, because that includes everything that the customer's paid. And I think generally that's a safe one to use when selecting a value column. So all the way down here, order total. We've then got an option to set the order status column. So I'm going to set this to, I think, the fulfillment status. It's probably the safest one. So you've got fulfillment status and fulfillment status code, which again is slightly confusing because it's processing or processing in capitals, but I'll just go for fulfillment status. You don't have to set this. As you can see, it's an optional field. The only reason you would want to set this is if you want to exclude certain statuses from the report. So what RFM Calc allows you to do is add a comma-separated list here of statuses that you want to exclude. So for example, if you wanted to exclude cancelled orders, you could do that here through the report setup rather than having to manually remove those rows from your CSV before you upload it. So that's kind of cool. Now for the customer ID, we'll go all the way back over to here in the sheet, and it's the email field is what we want to use for this. So Ecwid doesn't have an internal customer ID value that you could use. Some e-commerce platforms do, but again, unless every customer has that, you'd want to use email address anyway. So email is really, for 99% of cases, the best identifier to use as a customer ID. So we'll select email. Again, if you want to exclude certain IDs, so internal staff orders, for example, you can comma separate a list here of internal customer IDs to exclude, and that supports wildcards as well. So if you want to exclude all orders from your email domain, or assuming that they're test orders, for example, if your staff are placing orders and so on, you can exclude those really easily with this exclusion list feature. And then we've just got the customer information. So we've got, again, email for the customer email, customer phone. There's a shipping phone. We'll go for the billing phone, bill person phone column. For the customer's first name, we'll go for the bill person name. So as I mentioned, when we were going through the CSV, some platforms have first name and last name separated in the CSV. Ecwid doesn't, but that's no problem. You just set the name as the first name column and ignore the last name column. And then I don't think there was a separate column for customer company. No, which is fine, so we can ignore that. All this information is used for is just populating certain parts of the report. So in some places we'll generate, for example, a list of your 10 best customers, or your top customers who haven't purchased anything for the past 6 months, things like that. So that just pulls through this information here, but it's not essential. So if you're not able to map these columns for any reason, that's no problem. You've then got the option to add custom columns if your account plan supports it. So I'm on the huge plan, so I can add 10 custom columns. So really, this is up to you what you add. Quite often things like payment method and shipping method are common things that our customers like to use. So I'll add those here. And all that will do is that will generate additional reports based around the payment method and shipping method that the customer uses on their first order. So for example, on this one, you might find that for free shipping, the lifetime value and the average time to the second order, or the average time between the second and third order and so on, differs versus if they're selecting the express shipping. So that's kind of really interesting data, and that allows you a lot of flexibility then in terms of generating additional reports around any column that you want. And of course, you'll know if you've watched any of these videos before that you can add your own columns to the end of the CSV with custom data and then generate custom reports around that. So it's a really kind of powerful feature for RFM Calc that allows you to generate additional reporting data really easily. And then that's kind of it. So we'll call it test Ecwid 1. And there's the option here to anonymize customer data if you want to. So all that will do is replace all the real names and emails with fake ones, basically, if you don't want real names and emails appearing in your report. And that's no problem. Obviously, we don't need to do this because this is just a test order. And then finally, I'm just going to tick this box to overwrite the default project column mappings. And all that will do is assign all the options, all these columns that are mapped here will be set against the project permanently. So next time I come back to this project and schedule another Ecwid report, all these columns will already be mapped for me, which will obviously save some time. And that'll remember things like your exclusion lists as well as part of that. So save the mappings and continue. And that's it. So now that report is scheduled, that will generate in a couple of minutes, and I'll get an email to confirm the report's generated, and that will give me all the data that I'm looking for in terms of lifetime value, average time between orders, customer cohort analysis, RFM segmentation, and so on. That's all generated as standard as part of the report. Great, and that's everything. So just to summarize, today we've talked about Ecwid as a platform. We've had a little demo of the admin. I've shown you how to export orders as a CSV file. We've then been through that CSV file in detail to understand the structure. And then finally, we've imported that file back into RFM Calc by creating a project for Ecwid and scheduling a report. And so hopefully that's been useful and educational. Thanks for watching, really appreciate it. And obviously, if you have any questions on the platform, feel free to visit rfmcalc.com and drop us a line. Thanks very much.